B2B, we know that if we do outbound, we book a meeting and the likelihood of conversion. For me, I want us to be building structure that says, if I have 100 happy customers, I know that 25 of them would happily introduce us to new people. I need to find those 25. I need to build a repeatable process to get those introductions. And I need to track how quickly did those introductions turn into new customers. Let's almost call it like political calls. You wait and do the reference call later on. And quite often it's not our product is the best. It's the other product you're looking at is bad. So if I sell product A and I know they're looking at product A and B, I go through my customers and try and find a customer that's using us and previously used product B. I'm not trying, like the buyer at this point knows your product is good, otherwise they wouldn't be speaking with you. You're trying to put fear in them not to use the other one. When I get a reference call, I normally want it from my title or up. And I'm also seeing like, okay, like how, is someone with a big name willing to put in their time to say, yes, this product is good. But actually, earlier in the pipeline, I'm more interested in just a person I can trust because there's no bias here and they genuinely just would speak positively about the product. So I'm fascinated by, could a VP be connected with an end user of a product? Because at the beginning, they care much more about, will my team adopt this? You don't need to wait to have the expansion conversation around renewal. You can actually have it much, much earlier. If they're getting success, you're delivering value, they feel like they're getting more value than they paid for, that's the time to ask for the expansion. And I think it's the same thing with referral. Often people go, oh, I'll ask them in the QBR if they know this person. So my whole thing is you can ask way earlier, ask when the customer is having a really good time, and be extremely, extremely precise about what you're asking for.
Hello and welcome to the Scale Tail podcast. I'm your host Mausmi and I'm back with yet another awesome episode with an interesting topic. Today we're going to talk about customer advocacy and how it can be a powerful engine for revenue generation. And to talk on this topic, we have with us Christian Jakenfelds. Jakenfelds, yes, I just learned how to pronounce that. He has twice done the journey from 30 employees from pre-series A to 150 plus employees, $500 million valuation. So he's seen it all from small teams to large teams. He has worked as a customer success leader, GTM leader with B2B SaaS companies like Tessian and Planhat. And he now leverages his expertise as Go-To Network Evangelist at Commsor. And he's also the founder of Customer Success for Founders. It's a pleasure to have you on our podcast, Christian. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, really nice to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, I'm really happy that you could join. And what I really want to know, the first question that I always ask, right? How did you land up in customer success?
Yeah, it's a good question. So from very early on, I was involved in like SaaS and tech companies, and was always working in small early stage companies where I was doing a bit of everything. So often below 20 employees. I then came across Tessian, which was actually called Check Recipient when I first joined, and they had 2 jobs available at the time. I can't remember what they called the sales role, but funnily enough, they called the CS role Strategic Account Executive, I think, as well.
Yes, we've heard all those names.
Yeah. And funnily enough, whenever I apply for a company, I download and read everything I can about the company. So I downloaded some of their documents, like some of their case studies. And so I got an email from an SDR there like, hey, are you interested in buying? And I was like, I'll be honest. So I just responded like, look, I'm actually applying for a job. I'm not looking to buy. You've got these 2 roles. Like you're inside the company. Tell me the difference. And then they outlined, look, one is new business. One is making sure customers are successful. And I've always loved buying from a brand that cared about me getting the outcome that I was meant to get. So to be able to just focus on delivering the value someone not just assumed they would get, but very much paid for and had a right to believe they would get, I thought that was perfect. So ended up, because of always being in early stage startups, And then when CS started to become an established role, realizing that I could spend all of my time on making sure people got what they paid for.
And I'm glad you joined Planhat, and Planhat was a leader in setting the category, right? And the thing that you enjoy doing became like part of your job now. That's
Yeah.
what you do for everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Planhat was fantastic. So it still is a fantastic company.
Of course.
I was so at Tessian while I was there, we purchased Gainsight. So I was a Gainsight user and admin. And initially I was like, oh my God, we don't have to live in Salesforce. There's a tool just for us. This is heaven. We're not just second-class citizens in the CRM anymore. And then the bottleneck I hit with Gainsight, one, it was a heavy
Yeah.
kind of upskilling experience. If you wanted to be an admin in that, it wasn't straightforward. And then the other part was just the seat-based license really started to irk me. So we had at that time maybe 5 or 6 people in CS.
Mm-hmm.
And if we wanted to be able to share something with the sales team or the marketing team, it was going to cost us another seat. And CS weren't going to pay for a seat for another team, and the other team wasn't going to use their budget to pay for a CS software. And so we ended up building a fantastic data set that we could really use, but no one else in the business could see. And so while our CEO would talk about customer success as a philosophy, not a department, I found that technology was what was limiting us in being able to make that the case. So yeah, when I joined Planhat, and I know that's still the case today as well, but when I joined Planhat, we were all in on unlimited seats. And that to me was like, that is how you take customer success from being just a department to being a full company philosophy. So yeah, I kind of dove in headfirst.
And now you have moved into Commsor, which is more into advocacy. And I really want to talk about, because this is now, with all that experience that you have had, advocacy has become what you do. And I did read your post when you joined Commsor, where you talk about something very interesting. Happiest people live longest, and that brings you around to bringing this new career path towards advocacy and more that parallels with Commsor. So,
Yeah.
what do you understand about advocacy and why it excites you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I'm someone that I don't know how to put this to make it sound positive, but I get annoyed by things, and that's actually I think a skill. So every company I've joined, it's because it solves a problem that I'm like, this has annoyed me. We can do this better. So joined Tessian because I was like, yes, we can deliver on customer success and we can actually make sure people get what they paid for. Joined Planhat to be able to help companies do that broader. And then the wall I started to hit just living just in customer success was, I feel like customer success focused initially on, of course, retention. Hey, how do we make sure we deliver the value and our customers stay? So it's kind of wave 1, retention. Then wave 2, expansion. So how do we upsell our customers? And that's why the metric now is net revenue retention. So NRR. And I just feel like that next part that's missing, and this is why I joined Commsor, is right. You've got a customer who can't buy anything else from you, but adores you and will happily introduce you to 4 more companies. But because that activity doesn't show up in customer success's metrics, you don't operationalize it, you don't have strategy around it, you don't measure it, you don't reward on it. So the reason, what annoyed me and why I've now moved to Commsor is, how do we help customer success show that the value we deliver to customers creates new customers? And how do we actually have a metric that identifies that? Because, I saw sales teams that would hit their revenue target would be able to keep their full headcount. When the market turned, if you hit your revenue target, you kept your full headcount. I saw CS teams that hit NRR target and still would have to downsize a number. And for me, that's a big red flag that NRR is therefore not a big enough, strong enough metric. So I think what we need is to be able to demonstrate not just retention, not just expansion and therefore NRR, but equally how much of the new revenue generated from new customers was directly influenced from our existing customer base. And that's kind of the pain that I'm now chasing.
That's very interesting, where there is so much talk about people having revenue targets in CS, and there was a time where people didn't agree CS should have a revenue target, to a time where, like, I think there was just a survey a few weeks ago by G2 where they said around 70% of teams have revenue targets as one of their important targets in the business. And when you're talking about new revenue, which is a chunk that CS teams haven't touched yet. Of course, advocacy is part of their procedure, but the metric is not connected directly. And that's a very interesting point that you bring with the entire philosophy of Commsor.
Yeah, exactly. And I think advocacy, we've ended up with advocacy as a thing, as a word, because we didn't know where to put it. So advocacy is kind of sits more within marketing, right? And it's like, well, let's do events, let's do a case study. It's a little bit around like reference calls. But again, it's still not direct enough for me. Like we know that if we do outbound, we book a meeting and the likelihood of conversion. For me, I want us to be building structure that says, if I have 100 happy customers, I know that 25 of them would happily introduce us to new people. I need to find those 25. I need to build a repeatable process to get those introductions. And I need to track how quickly did those introductions turn into new customers. Because what we already know is that when a deal comes via referral, it closes faster for higher ACV and they stay longer.
Absolutely.
So I'm sitting there like, hang on, we've put all of this structure in place to drive NRR. And yet you go to most companies and there is no repeatable structure or way to measure referral or advocacy, because advocacy becomes really fluffy. Is, well, did they speak at this event? And you're like, what? I don't care if they spoke at an event to 1,000 people. I want a guy that will introduce me to 4 people that buy in the next quarter. That's much more valuable than someone who speaks in an event.
Absolutely.
I can draw the exact revenue dollar that we generated from that.
So, in your experience, right, have you seen any really successful, good advocacy programs? And if you can just tell us a little bit about how we can go about thinking in this process and probably doing something within their businesses.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm still learning about this myself. What I am finding is that I do think while the metric reflects on customer success, I do actually think it is a marketing owned metric, just like how retention reflects on sales. But of course, it needs to be owned by customer success.
Right.
And the reason that is if you're a CMO at the start of the year, you go, okay, I have a budget of 100 and I need to create 1,000 high quality leads. How am I going to spend this 100 to get those 1,000? Well, I'm going to put 20 into events. I'm going to put 40 into SDRs. I'm going to put 20 into this marketing campaign.
Correct.
And I think we need advocacy and this repeatable kind of reference and refer leads. Therefore, I'm going to put 10% of my budget and I have to get 100 high quality leads out of it. That's how I think we start to make it more repeatable and structured. Then it's working with customer success to say, like, look, we need to get 100 high quality leads. Here's the process to do it. Here's how marketing can help. But of course, customer success, you're the best place for it. You know this customer, you know you've got a QBR with them, you know they can't buy anymore, you know that this customer, this champion has just moved to a new account, and actually the CSM is the best person to do the outbound on that account, because they can just send a LinkedIn message going, oh, super cool that you've started, would love to have a catch up just to hear how it's going. And I've had that as a CSM where that champion who's moved accounts on that call tells me their budget, what they're currently using, when it renews, how much they don't like it, the person that I need to talk to if I want to bring in my product. And you're like, you would never tell an SDR or an AE this, but this relationship can be leveraged. So best advocacy programs I've seen, it is marketing owned, but that metric reflects back onto CS. And there's more to it, but that's kind of the headlines.
I love the way you put the entire structure together, the way you put the metric in, starting with like what are targets, leads from advocacy. Because unless there is a metric that is riding on top of that and you're chasing it, that never gets done. Most of the time people set up targets like I want so many case studies or so many testimonials, but those are not going to get you the revenue end of the metric, and unless it is aligned, it does not really make sense. So I find it very interesting the way you're putting the whole structure together in the thought process around it. What can go wrong? As in, what are the challenges, problems in this? What is hard?
It's a good question. So I think let's start with the easy. And I think there's some great tools out there that are helping with the easy.
Of course.
So if you can just track when someone leaves one of your accounts and moves to a new account, very straightforward, easy to follow up with. What can be hard is the relationships that you don't see. So here's my champion. They love us. I can see that we have 100 shared LinkedIn connections. I don't know which of those people they could give me a warm introduction to. That's the hard. That's why I've joined Commsor, because that's what we're trying to solve. I think what a lot of companies do wrong, or with good intentions end up doing wrong, is you see the same thing with reference calls. You find one person that's really happy to do reference calls, and you use them nonstop until they go, hey, maybe just stop using me for 2 months. And it's the same with referrals. It's the same thing of, hey, I know you know this person, I know you know this person, I know you know this person. So and I posted about this the other day, what I think a lot of people do wrong is they don't give that advocate enough information as to why they're asking. So if I was to ask you for an introduction to someone and say, hey, can you introduce me? You'd probably be like, not the right time, right? Because I've just said, hey, introduce me. If I said, hey, I'm trying to reach John. I can see he works at this company. He's posted about this specific problem. Share that LinkedIn post. We have several other companies that are really similar, XYZ, and we've solved this particular problem for them here. I've even attached a case study. So not too different to the outbound you would send John, but just gets lost in the noise. But by sending it to you and saying, for these reasons, I think it would be a valuable conversation with John. You know him better than I do. Do you think these stack up? If they do, feel free just to forward on that message and say, hey, Christian would like to speak with you. Would you like the introduction? Too often we think that person knows them. They'll just introduce me. No, you're leveraging their trust. You need to do the same level of effort you would do on personalized outbound as you would on kind of personalized referral request.
Well, this is great. Now, what you're basically saying is the person who's introducing, actually now it becomes not a favor to you, but for him doing a favor to the other person whom you're introducing, that this is something valuable. Why don't you have a look? You just change the entire leverage to the other side of the conversation. And
a good referral request, all the person needs to do in the middle is add a sentence at the top which says, this sounds interesting. Would you like me to forward on your email? That's it. They just need to be like, you've written everything I need to say. Let me just add me giving it a thumbs up at the top when I forward it on to the person.
Correct. Absolutely. You need to help them out as much as possible. And the other point that you raised, I think that's very relevant. You choose 5 people and then you overload them with, can you talk to this guy? And this person is, buying, and can you have a conversation? And then it becomes too much for that person. And how many referrals can you get? Or you would always delay giving a referral in the sales process. Like you don't want to overload. So you will only give referrals or referral call options to people who are towards the end of the journey, like about to close. Right? Which I think nowadays almost every B2B company who's trying to close a deal definitely wants to have a few referral calls or talk to someone to have that trust factor, basically, that I'm not doing it wrong and there are others around me who are happy and we're all going into it together.
But it's funny as well, because I think so many of those reference calls now are actually quite often, I don't know how to put it, let's almost call it like political calls. You wait and do the reference call later on. And quite often it's not our product is the best, it's the other product you're looking at is bad. So if I sell product A and I know they're looking at product A and B, I go through my customers and try and find a customer that's using us and previously used product B. I'm not trying, like the buyer at this point knows your product is good, otherwise they wouldn't be speaking with you. You're trying to put fear in them not to use the other one. And like it works, but it's a strange.
It's not the best strategy, let's say that.
Yes.
It's not the
But
best
I think
way to put the story together.
I think it's used quite a lot. And that's why, yeah, I think what I'm really fascinated about at the moment is this idea that when I get a reference call, I normally want it from my title or up. And I'm also seeing like, okay, like how, is someone with a big name willing to put in their time to say, yes, this product is good. But actually, earlier in the pipeline, I'm more interested in just a person I can trust because there's no bias here and they genuinely just would speak positively about the product. So I'm fascinated by, could a VP be connected with an end user of a product? Because at the beginning, they care much more about, will my team adopt this? And so while the reference is not on the same level, they're actually getting much more what they need from it because it's someone saying, yes, I love it. Yes, I use it every day. I'm so happy my manager bought it. And you would never do that as a reference call near the end, but it's still massively impactful. And when you think about it, if you've got 100 customers, you have 100 VPs. But if you have 100 customers, you probably have 1,000 end users. And now you've got way more people you can go and get a reference call from or referral call from because you've changed what the whole point of the call is about.
Correct. You've changed the entire conversation from a different level.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting point of view, Christian. I don't think much has been talked about on this. I love the perspectives that you bring on the table. So with Commsor, and of course before as well, you must have seen some amazing examples of companies using, advocacy and referrals to their advantages. Any companies that come to mind, or any strategies actually that come to mind? I know you've already spoken quite a few things in the conversation, but any strategies or anything that come to mind which you think was amazing? Or some company who's used this extensively and, really in a great way?
No particular companies. There's a lot out there doing well, but I still think, when you compare it to what they were doing in renewal and expansion, the advocacy piece was still much further behind. One of the biggest things I've liked is from research from Greg Danes. And he was talking more about expansion conversations. And his point was, you don't need to wait to have the expansion conversation around renewal. You can actually have it much, much earlier. If they're getting success, you're delivering value, they feel like they're getting more value than they paid for, that's the time to ask for the expansion. And I think it's the same thing with referral. Often people go, oh, I'll ask them in the QBR if they know this person. So my whole thing is you can ask way earlier, ask when the customer is having a really good time and be extremely, extremely precise about what you're asking for. I can see you're connected to these three people. I think here's why we would help the first. Here's how we could help the second. Here's how we could help the third. Which of the three would you be willing to make an introduction on based on how successful you've been with the product so far? So that's the best thing I've seen. It's not waiting until you can't sell them anymore. It's not waiting until the QBR. Too many companies leave it late because, in my opinion, because they're not measured on it. If I'm a CSM and I've got a meeting with a customer and I can either sell them an upsell or I can ask for a referral, that referral doesn't show up anywhere in my metrics. Doesn't show up,
absolutely.
So I'm going to push for expansion first. So I think the companies that will do best at this in the future are the companies that understand, if I can sell a 20K expansion or I can get a 20K new customer, actually that 20K new customer could make more sense because I can then sell both of them a 20K expansion in the future. But while we all are meant to work on the same thing, I do think new business and kind of post-sales have slightly diverged. And so I think the companies that will do it well will be the companies that will reward the CSM for a referral as much as they reward the CSM for expansion, because it all still impacts cost of customer acquisition and LTV, which is what we are working on.
Absolutely. And also it creates a great conversion if it moves from that route. A slightly different question, Christian. Now, advocacy also comes with a pressure of creating case studies. And a lot of companies I have seen, they use case study extensively for their outbound purposes. And it does make sense, right? Like you are similar kind of company, I'm sending you a case study where it's obviously happening. So that's one channel which marketing leverages. And of course, it can also instigate some calls, referrals, etc. Generating case studies is another part of it, right? What do you think that could improve or support in terms of making sure there is more output in terms of getting those case studies in the right format? I know it's a slightly different topic from
No, yeah.
advocacy, but based on your experience, I would really like to dig into that as well.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that comes as part of CS, right? For advocacy umbrella.
So there's a couple of things here. One, I think the way we do customer case studies
Mhm.
is still okay in a few areas. One is, there is a huge amount of value in just getting a big name account happy to do a case study with you. If someone goes on your
Of
website
course.
and they see you've got a case study with Microsoft,
Yes.
it doesn't even really matter what's in
Yes.
the case study at that point. The fact not only would that logo buy from you, but they put their logo on a document with you, like that is still fantastic for marketing. If they can do that, almost inside that document could be absolute nonsense. Just that alone is powerful. After that, I think Chris Ritson, an SDR leader I've worked with in the past couple of times, really talks about this well, where it's like the case study needs to be really attached to a specific outcome. Don't just say we helped this
Always.
company. It's like in this case study, here is one sentence that shows we made this metric go up 20%. I know this metric matters to this person I'm speaking to. So it's the same when you're a CSM. If you're looking for someone to do a case study, if you can get the big logos, great. But after that, find the people where the specific metric that your company cares about has had the greatest increase and get that company. Because if I've never heard of this company, but when I receive that email or I download that case study, the metric I need to go up clearly went up. That's the evidence I need. I don't care if I don't know the logo. The thing you said you're good at, I can now see you're good at. And that's what I think we need to do more of. The last thing I'll say here is, and I've been guilty of this in the past as well, it is quite funny how often I feel case studies were written and then the customer just signed it at the end. Like, how much did the customer actually say that's in that document? And it's the same on company websites, right? You go on a website and you see a quote from someone, and I've seen instances where that customer they have on their website hasn't been a customer for 18 months,
Ooh.
and the person who gave the quote hasn't been at that company for 2 years. And you're like, well, okay, this is if I did any research, this is actually doing the complete opposite of what you want to achieve here.
Correct.
So this is why my whole thing is this referral, having a huge base of people that will speak positively live is much more valuable than a quote that's 2 years old from someone I don't know, that if I looked anywhere below the surface, I would see is actually no longer relevant.
It's I think from that thought process, that's the reason people put so much effort in getting G2 reviews and Capterra reviews, because you believe, of course, that you would have, and you assume that G2 would have vetted at somebody who is a genuine person, has gone and written reviews, and it's all there. So you can go and refer and feel more confident that, I am using this product and I'm not alone, and there are others who have written positive and negatives, and I'm aware.
Yeah.
And if that goes one step ahead, then you can talk to those people as well. Then it becomes so much more confident, in terms of getting that information, and maybe ask a question or two beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, I on the topic of G2, I think those kind of websites are very quickly becoming like Amazon reviews, where you're looking. Do you ever use IMDb to check whether a movie or TV show is going to be good, right? Like if it says 8.7, you don't trust that it's exactly 8.7, but you're like, okay, this is good to great.
Yeah.
Like it's not horrible. If it's a 6, you go, okay, well, it probably depends on the flavor. Like, is it your kind of film or not? If you like comedies and it's a 6, you'll probably be okay. I'm starting to feel like review websites are like that. If it's a 4.9 or 4.1, they're probably both fine. It just, does it solve your problem? If it's a 2 versus a 4, depends how many reviews it has. So I kind of think that all of these platforms are in such a rush, and that they really, they punish you if you don't get enough reviews. There's a lot of companies spending a lot of money on review websites.
You don't have a choice, unfortunately.
There you go.
You don't have a choice. All our customers go on G2 and check, and almost every SaaS company website you go to, there are GT reviews there because customers want to see it. Last question. Okay? Yeah. If a new company wants to start, focusing on advocacy being one of their lead gen processes, where do they start? I know you already put the thought process of putting a metric down there and putting a target, but can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So where do you really start? It's have a very clear metric of success for your customers, so that you can say, we know this customer is being successful. We can tell them they're being successful. They agree they're being successful. It's everything customer success. You can't do much until you've got that nailed down. Once you've got that nailed down, I think it's actually having, sales, marketing, and CS coming together. And what I'm trying to help figure out is, if we compensate CSMs on, base salary and NRR, I think there needs to be a metric that comes after NRR, which is percentage of new revenue or dollar of new revenue that was generated directly from our customers saying good things about us, or being willing to say good things about us. So where should you start? It may even just be a really simple spiff. It doesn't need to be a big change, but hey, customer success, as a team, you're now being measured not just on NRR, but on this additional factor, and start talking about it internally. My big vision, my dream is, at town halls all over SaaS world, first slide is always sales. It's just how it works. Sales get to go first, right? Sales go, we did $4 million of new revenue. Yeah. Everyone claps. Next slide, let's hope it's customer success. Customer success go up and say, we had 120% NRR. There's a clap. And then that second point is, 40% of all of that new business revenue was generated because of our customers. And that's what I think we need to be doing to elevate customer success to what it can be. My belief is that NRR is a local maximum, if you will. Like, it looks really good, and when we look around, it looks like it's the best. We have to go down that mountain to then climb the next, and that is, how are we clearly impacting new revenue? And at that point, CEOs will be it's just so painfully obvious that doing customer success is the right way. And I think we need to take some ownership that we are not doing a good enough job of explaining it, because our CEOs are smart people. And if the CEO is going, it makes more sense to spend money on these bad lead qualities because at least it helps us grow faster, we're doing a bad job of explaining why that's the bad option.
Awesome. I think that's the best note in which we can come to a conclusion to this podcast, Christian. This was amazing. I loved it, and I love the candor with which you talk. Thank you very much for a fantastic podcast. Thanks for joining. And thank you for all the listeners for joining us today in the podcast. If you'd like to connect with Christian, his LinkedIn link will be there in the description. And if you like the podcast, feel free to follow, subscribe. We are available on all major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. And if you like us, please subscribe. We need more advocacy to get this going faster. Thanks, Christian. I loved the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.